I always like to kick off any meeting by saying, are you guys ready to app it up?
Yes.
He's smiling, I think he is.
I know some
A little
Buffalo
cheesy
ones.
app humor, right?
All right, well, my name's Steve O'Brien. I am the CEO of Noble Applications,
I'm Tracy Skokstad, and I'm the Marketing Accounts Manager for Noble Applications.
and we're talking about apps, and we like to show our whole team because it takes a whole team to build an app. So some of the folks that you see back here are like really geeky people, like Carrie, where she's programming backends and servers and figuring out how to make media servers performant, or how to do file sharing in a performant way, and how to architect systems that feed a website, a web application, mobile apps, content that would go to Amazon Fire TV or Roku or something like that. So we need these really gritty people that can program servers and make systems performant. Any business logic on any system that happens behind the scenes, we like to have centralized to the server and then feeds up to the clients. So we have designers on our team, so we have Jenny and Jess up here. And what's really a key thing and a key distinction to note, if any of you have been in software for a while, back 10, 15 years ago, making software was about 90% focus on the logic, where it's like, oh, we're going to build a website or something, it's going to have a drop down, and we just need that logic. We need to know the data that people are doing on screens and passing it to servers. Today, since any website, any web application, anything that you use on an internet-enabled device, it needs to be mobile, whether it's an app or not. So we spend 90% of our focus on the interface now, and about 10% on the programming, which is about the opposite as it was 15 years ago. So the designers are really important, not just for aesthetic or beauty, but making things really easy to use. And then we have a whole team, people that make apps, people that make websites, people that make web applications, people that make desktop software, any of the front-end applications. So we need a full team in order to make an app. So when we're talking about apping it up, we're really talking about building a whole system that's sort of integrated and cohesive.
Who has like a ton of apps on their phone and actually use them every day? Most everyone, right? When we were researching this and kind of prepping for this, I'm like, I really need some updated stats. I'm always in marketing, I'm doing data. User feedback is really, really important to me. And I looked at it, like, where are we at right now? And this is really, really interesting to me that in 2019, how we're starting out is 1/6 of the total media content consumed will consist of online video views. That is huge, and it's really, really important in this day and age because we're always on something, right? We're on a tablet, we're on our computer, and we're on our phone. And what this shows here is over the next 5 years, 45% increase in app downloads, up to 258 billion app downloads are coming by 2022. 45% increase is crazy, but it is trending upward, and that's why we're here, to talk to you about why apps are important. Do you actually need an app, or are there some other things that you should be doing to get to that level? And I think that's kind of the heart of our presentation today. Here's an awesome screen. So if you read this, 13%, only 13% are using mobile web. The other 87% are on a mobile app. So they're spending, it's crazy, right here. An hour an hour spent on the web is 7 hours on mobile apps. Yeah, that's crazy, right? And that also speaks to, I think, kids, people consuming, like, why they're not as engaged. I think with community media centers, engagement is huge. And I think I'd like to speak to that in a little while on how you should be engaging with your community, really getting to know their needs and wants. And then some of the tactics that you can do to serve that up to them in an app, maybe in a different platform as well.
All All right, so what that means is you and I are in the right business. Right? We're in the right business.
Yeah, that's true.
But why is that important to you folks in community media? And I wanted to reiterate what today's mission is. Developing an app for your community media center could make it easier for your viewers. And I think the point that Tracy and I are going to make is with certain things that are going on in your industry and your world, it might become more of a necessity than a nicety, right? We're a pretty small group here. What are some of the problems that you're all facing right now as community media centers?
Funding.
Funding. You need money?
Sure.
Yep. Any other problems?
Cord cutting.
Cord cutting? Why, it's funny that you mentioned that. I never thought of cord cutting. Yeah, that would be a problem,
That would
wouldn't
be
it?
it,
Right?
yes.
Yeah, so thanks a lot. He did not see the presentation
He did
beforehand.
not.
That guy, it was going to be a really long session if I had to be like, any other problems? But thanks for making that number 2.
Sure.
I really
Yeah.
appreciate that. So cord cutting, I have AT&T UVerse at my house, so I'm still accessible. I'm still part of your broad accessible market at my house.
Sadly, I'm a cord cutter, but I am very connected though. So I have, I watch local channels through rabbit ears that come through my TV, which is really interesting that I have to get my local channels because that's still important to me. Local news is important to me, and I think a trend that we've seen in our business is that a lot less people are watching less of that because they don't have it like foremost. You know what I mean? Like you can't just quick turn it on if you're a cord cutter. Constantly I see posts on, you were mentioning Facebook before, I see posts on Facebook like, okay, I'm thinking of this and this, but how do I get to see the Packers play? How do I get to watch my news? How do I get my local stuff? And there's not one answer for it. There's not an easy answer for it, and so that's a problem that I've come up against. But again, I am part of, I guess, a generation that it is still important for me to see what's happening locally. And I think that's why we're all here too, is, how can we serve up those customers in our own communities and just, provide the, viewership. I like that as well. I asked Lisa earlier what your demographic is. She said there's not one demographic that she can speak to except for it's hyper local news. And I have kids in the community, and so for me, sports are a big thing for me to see. School board presentations, I'm from the Rosa area. And I see all of those things, and it's all provided through community media. And so I see those things that are important, but I also see the challenges in cord cutters too.
And then from what I've heard, anyway, and probably from Lisa, and it's on the WisconsinCommunityMedia.com advocacy page, is there some FCC ruling that people are haggling over, which may hurt with your first point that you brought up, which is funding. So, there's, I have a question mark next to problems. And the reason there's a question mark there is related to what you're saying, because I do have AT&T UVerse at my house. I might watch and consume media for 30 minutes a day in my house, maybe an hour if my wife and I are going to watch something on Netflix. But most of the media that I consume is on my PC or it's on my mobile phone now, right? Like, I never watch the news on TV. I get all my news off the internet. Even if I'm watching my favorite cable news channel, it's on the internet that I watch it, right? It'll be like in a window while I'm working a little later at night. So people are consuming the media on their mobile devices or on their PCs. So whether they cut cords or not, the way that people are consuming them, and the stats bear this out, that's part of the 7 hours per the 1 hour, right? That's part of the 7 hours that they're spending on their phones is consuming media. So the way that we see it is evolution. And in full disclosure, like I can't talk about all the companies that we work with, but like with Wisconsin Eye and some of their companies, we've worked with them and some other community media places. So we do have visibility into the challenges that are there, right? And we've helped them and learn a little bit about it. We've worked with other media companies as well. But the way that we've come to think about it, if we were to like architect a system for a community media center, is we really think the hub needs to be right here in the middle. So we have iOS, your website, and Android. People either have iOS or Android phones for the most part. And that's your hub. That's where you can engage them. You direct them what content you have available. You try to communicate with them in a conversation, not just a one-way blast, but you allow them the opportunity to know what you've made available on your website and in your apps. You still are going to be broadcasting out to various channels, if you will. It's just not going to be the same ones that you're used to, where you have a cable access TV channel where you're blasting out to. The cord cutting has led to people splitting up and being on all types of different things. Some people have Chromecast, some people have Fire TV, some people have Roku. I brought my own Apple TV today so that I could make sure that I'd be able to broadcast. So you're going to have to broadcast out to various channels. On your hub, like, you can do a live event. You can stream out a live event if you have a live event. You're going to record it, like I'm sure our friend David's doing back there right now, and that might be available later for playback. So kind of one of the benefits is you don't have to hit people once or twice with a scheduled event on a channel. Once you have your content out there, it can stay out there, it can be accessed so you can reach a larger audience within an environment of continued engagement in your hub.
I have a comment to add to that, or a question for everyone here. I've seen, obviously, a lot of the community media centers are very intertwined with the government websites, right? With the exception of some. Who here is, has a website that operates through, like, their city government? Okay. And then are there any that are independent? Okay. So, question. So, I was talking earlier, which was awesome, and she was telling me that she runs independently, which I think is interesting, whereas most are part of the government. So are you allowed to create your own website? Like, are there rules or regulations that have to do with putting your information out there?
It'll vary from community to community.
Gotcha. Okay. Interesting. So it speaks to how you want to like set up this hub. So it's about half and half.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
You need that digital hub. People find you digitally. They might Google you. You might have techniques for making them aware. You need that hub. Does anybody in here know what this symbol is?
Podcast?
It's a podcast symbol. Yeah. So, for when I started mobile applications, I read an article about how mobile was eating the world, right? And I was like, yeah, it's a good business to get into. I'm glad I made that decision. Just as an observation, podcasts are totally eating the world right now. Like, when you see people, like younger folks too, they have their headphones in. Like, they're not listening to Quiet Riot like I was when I was in 8th grade. They're like listening to podcasts, right? They start at a young age. My daughter's 7. She's been listening to podcasts since she was 2 years old. There's podcasts targeted at her. Wow in the world now. Does anybody do any podcast production or make podcasts available in the room? We got a couple? All right, cool. So the other thing then, like I kind of have down here, more sort of engagement things. Here's the channels that you're broadcasting out to. And then down here are more of your engagement techniques to feed people to your site with content. So in a hyperlocal environment, this symbol is an RSS feed symbol. And for me, getting RSS feeds is really the only way I keep on top of my local news, right? Like, there's cable news, there's social media, it all seems to be national stuff. You're watching channels that are available nationally. Even local news viewership is down, right? Like, they're having a hard time staying in business, local channels even. And for a hyper-local community, like if I want to know what the football score is in Merrill, I would probably want to be set up to where I consume that on an RSS feed. If my city council is having a big meeting or a vote on something that matters to me, I probably want to get that on an RSS feed. And if my community media center had a mobile app, I'd probably want to receive a push notification about it saying, hey, this is going on today. You can live stream it, or it'll be available on our website or in our app later, right? So this is sort of how we would architect
What
the
does that
evolution.
look like? What can that look like? And I think we're going to show an example of an app that combines all of these things. Now this is a business that is grown, has totally grown. You know, they started out very, very small with some of these, you know, small engagement things, and they've grown from having a website to a web app, and then applications. So Android and iOS. So
That's
we're just-
right. And I'll talk about it a little bit. So
Yeah.
who is this? It's not a community media center. What they are is they're a life coach school. And they have a program called Self-Coaching Scholars. So she was saying it's grown. They started with a small community where it was a woman named Brooke, right? And she was coaching people one-on-one. She had some problems in her life. She totally turned her life around. Started to get some traction in coaching people in and around the Dallas area. She started putting materials together, like what we're looking at is video. I know it's kind of small on your screen here. But she started putting materials together, doing handouts, sending people packages every month, and built a business of coaching people to improve their lives and to get around problems that they have. Then she started coaching people that she coached and turn their lives around to become other coaches. So this is an app for what's called Self-Coaching Scholars. That's where it says SCS. This is over a $10 million a year business. And part of it is because they've created a community, if you can follow me on the analogy, and they have a way of getting their content into the palms of people's hands. So we have welcome videos here. You know, it's a multimedia thing. We have inspirational things. We can turn this sideways and view these things and see Brooke up close if you want to. There's a nice little menu on here. They have classes, and this is really where I want to show you. It's an ongoing communication and dialogue with folks. So you sign up, you get something every month. Right now we're in May, and if I go to May, I can see that I have videos here. They're videos, and this is sort of an interesting thing with podcasts eating the world. We actually came up with this idea, and I think it was a pretty good one. You know, it's them talking on a camera, and very often it's filmed real time like this is. It's real-time sessions, and then they make them available the next month in videos. And I can just save the audio from this because it's still effective. And then it's available as a podcast within the app offline for me, so that if I'm driving to work or I'm on the train or wherever I am, I can listen to it as well. But in short, it's all of the stuff that makes your program available in an app. They have Q&As. There's, you know, the people can submit questions and ask them nationally, and then she answers them. You know, if one person submits it, she answers the question to everybody nationally. Everybody gets it in their app right away. So there's a lot to this. They do a lot of live stream stuff, a lot of recording stuff. They have podcasts. They have prepackaged videos, on-the-fly stuff, workbooks. They reference the workbooks in their videos. But it's a real nice thing. Like it's really an amazing company where they've taken this entire thing, digitized components of it, and really engage their community of people that want to improve their own lives, and then also teach people so that they can improve their lives as well. So that's sort of what it looks like and what our vision is that we were talking about. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I guess stepping back a little bit, because there's a lot there, and they have a lot of functionality and a lot of things in their app that, quite frankly, you wouldn't need right away in an app. We talk about MVPs, and to us that's a minimal viable product, right? Where everyone kind of starts out. And for this kind of conversation, I use the analogy of learn, right? How do you get to a point where you can grow? What are the things that you need to do before you can even consider an app? The first thing is learn from your audience, right? Learn who your audience is. Learn about all the things that they want to watch. Learn the things that are interesting to them, and most importantly, learn from the challenges that they're having, the things that they hate about community media, the things that they don't like to see. Learn from those things. and then engage with them. Have open conversations, right? Hopefully, you've created some business goals and that you can, when you're engaging with them, those can be adjusted based on user feedback. At that point, you want to create an action plan for short-term goals, long-term goals. Maybe it's important for someone to be reminded that you have an upcoming school board meeting. And so push notifications might be an awesome functionality to have, right? I'm a busy mom. I can't get to the school board meeting, but I know that it's going to be shown. Could I go onto my app and watch it right away? Or could I get a notification on my app that it is actually, about to start, or I can play it back later? That's helpful to me. Those are things in a busy world that I find that is just simple and could be overlooked, but it helps me. And it also helps them engage with you either in the short term or long term when they come back to watch your channels. So really that's about that action plan, what that looks like, and then you start putting some of those things into play. The next thing, which would be to reevaluate some of those conversations. Are they making an impact in your community? And then set realistic expectations on what you can do. What can you afford to do at this point? I mean, that's what the heart of the matter is, right? What can you afford to do? Do you need a grant specifically for this? Is there an investor or someone else that believes in this? So set realistic expectations, and then also enhance them with services that they will enjoy, that they find helpful, and that they can learn from. And then, of course, the N in my learn is new. Create those new offerings and roll them out. Get that user feedback and introduce them to all of your demographics that you've learned so much about. Be out in the community. So that's how you do it from a very, very simplistic kind of point of view. But you take all those things and then you actually make the decision do you need an app? Can you afford an app? And I think we can talk to that a little bit as well and answer maybe some questions on if you were to create an app, what kind of questions that you have, and then we can kind of go from there. Does that sound?
Sounds good.
That's good.
What time should we be wrapping up? Because we can.
1:15.
Oh, we have plenty of time.
Okay.
Great. I'm totally prepared for that. You guys are going to be so bored pretty soon. It's gonna be great. No, I'm just kidding.
No.
Just the other thing to help you envision the product, we showed the app a little bit. They have this hub, which is their website. They have the apps. Then they're in a web application as well. So everything that I showed you on the app that makes sense, right, is available in a web application as well, where they can navigate to documents and have people on a program. And for us, we're developers of applications, websites, mobile apps, and everything. So we know the importance of design and everything. And I think if I wanted to get engaged with my community at a local level, at a really hyper local level, I'd want to get their attention a little bit. So we have kind of thoughts about how design plays into that, and I'm not downplaying Wausau area access media or anything like that. But there's differences in how media is presented, or we have Wisconsin Rapids because they're down the road as well. And we think a lot of people are kind of using the same product and the same flow. What we're presenting is certainly not a novel idea, right? Like above the fold, as we used to call it on websites, right? They have their various channels here, access to videos, etc. So, the concept I don't think is novel to everybody. I think everybody is in this room for a reason, maybe because they thought of having a technology platform, but maybe doesn't know how to execute it, and that's what you might want to learn about. So the first thing, I'll let you talk about
Sure.
if you do decide that you want to do this, there's a way to approach it in a process, and it's really more about the goals for the business or the goals for the government in certain cases or the goals for your users. So I'll let Tracy talk about this.
Yeah, I think this was interesting. So I did some research, and this article is actually from 2 years ago. I don't know if anyone has ever seen it, but it's from Forbes. And it was actually how mobile apps can help community media with community outreach. And I thought that was interesting because that's what we're talking about, right? Like we want to reach out to the communities that we're in, find out about what's important to them, and then create solutions or create programming that addresses each one of those items. And so this article is awesome. Like I said, it's a couple years old, but I think it's still very, very relevant into the conversation that we're having. And then action steps, things that you can do now to kind of prepare for that. So, you know, delivering unique experiences and then creating value. How do you think you create value right now for your community center? Like, just give me a couple things that how you think you're creating value. Anybody?
Covering, being hyper-local, covering what's going on in the community. I mean, that's the most basic answer.
Yep.
Do
And
you have an
then,
example? I'm
yeah,
sorry.
no, go ahead.
What's an example of that? Like, in what community and what was covered? Like, it helps us.
If you want to see Sun Prairie football, you gotta watch our channel.
All right.
Okay, and that's awesome. So how do they know that they have to watch your channel and they can get that football game? Like, what are the marketing things, or how are people finding out about that?
Alex goes door to door.
I do not.
Do not.
I mean, your typical channels,
Yeah.
Facebook and Twitter, and
Yeah.
we do news releases in the local paper and our website.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Cross
We tried-
on the radio.
Promote on a radio station. We try to do
Yeah.
a crawl on our TV station,
Gotcha.
telling people that's coming up.
Okay, that's good. So
Nothing mind-blowing, I don't think.
no, but you're also, are you interacting with the school district itself? Are you getting them to talk about that their game is going to be on your channel?
Not as much as we would like.
Okay, and is that because there's a barrier with the school district, or is that just because there's not enough time in a day to try to do one more thing to get your channel out
They
there?
don't like people to know that we are televising the games because they want people at the games.
Very interesting. Very, very interesting. So just real quick backstory. So my son, he's a freshman in high school, and I do the social media on a volunteer basis for their hockey team and for his golf team. And so that is interesting because I think school districts are very like, oh, how can we use our kids and our parents as much as we can? But when they have something like a community media center that is willing to actually already do some of that for them, they're not making the connection between, hey, this is available here it'll actually generate more interest if there's more eyes on it, right? And that's the
That's what we think,
yeah, and that's the disconnect. But I also think that some of that messaging goes into some of the things with the strategy behind it. So this screen is just really about creating value. So you're already creating value in your own minds, and then in that, it's just a matter of like getting it out there in that messaging platform. Next, Steve, how do you do your next thing?
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, no, that's okay, it disappeared, so. Okay, so, and we can make this link available too for this article, but this is really directly from there, but how do we do that? Number one, we use inclusive and multidisciplinary collaboration when setting objectives. You know, we've already talked about this. This is just part of your regular business plan and goals, right? The same can be said if you're wanting to create an app to put all your stuff into it. You still want to do all of these things. Identify the specific goals. You want to have your objectives, and then who is it going to be? You know, is it the older person who's just starting to use a cell phone? You know, their grandkids are showing them how to text. You know, is that the right, you know, platform for them? I'm not sure, but how can you make it easier for them? Those are things to be considered, and that's early on in the process. Number two, consider all the communities you serve while developing your mobile app. Obviously, age groups, location, special interest groups. We talked about, is it the people that are interested in sports? Is it the people that are interested in just government stuff? You know, like they can't get out of their house, but they want to talk about it online all day after, where they see it on one of your channels, right? Is it those people? So you want to, you know, look at when you're planning an app or planning a platform to emphasize the real life benefits for them. Again, I mentioned the push notifications functionality. To me, that's what you're looking for. Those little things that make people's lives easier and can save them time. This goes into all the planning and just knowing the community that you serve. And then work with influencers to launch your mobile app. So Alex, that's your name, right? So you're out there and you're looking for people to, knock on those doors. Who are those people? Is it the mayor? Is it your whoever it is, right? Your community business people. Can you go and have a booth at your local business expo? What are those things that you can do to promote your business and then say, hey, and oh, by the way, we might be planning to build an app or a platform. What would you like to see in it? It's truly getting that engaging and getting that user feedback and working with the people that can talk about it. And then you mentioned the schools and how they have, issues with thinking that not people are coming there. But I would get in touch with some of the business classes, some of the other classes that are out there offer to, they're speaking things. I could see Alex, doing an awesome presentation on the benefits of it. Have you done that before? But that's something though that then you create that connection, making connections, right? You make that connection to people and they're like, oh, they're not trying to take all the people and sit at home. They really want it to be open up to a much wider audience.
You could DECA project, actually.
That would be a great DECA project, that would be an awesome DECA project. And a lot of schools have audio-visual things as well, and clubs, and some of those people as well to talk about it, but DECA is an awesome way to go. I know personally in one of our high schools, the business teacher, he actually has speakers weekly and talking about anything you can possibly imagine and is constantly looking for them. He'd be very curious as to something like that. And then...
Yeah, what I was going to say is we kind of went through that process
Yeah.
from a Forbes article.
We did.
And what you're seeing on the screen now is just our standard typical process for any app project. And
For anybody that comes to us wanting an app.
that's it. And the parallels are right there, right?
Yep.
So the first thing that our design team and our business analysis team do is they want to understand what are the goals of the business, right? What are the goals for the community media center? And what are your users going to do with this app? We're going to map that journey. We're going to figure out how to get them where they want to go as quickly as possible with heuristic evaluations. We're going to do a competitive analysis. So we're going to say, hey, you got to go talk to the school and say, if you're on more TVs and more people watch it, they're going to want to go to the games more. And figure out competitive strategies as well. Develop personas for everybody. And then what Tracy was just ending with on the last one is an analytics review. So whenever we write anything down here or here where we have business and user goals, we want to make sure that we can measure it to make sure that we're achieving those goals. So there's even functionality or forms that we'll put into apps just to learn if we're achieving our goals, just for users to identify themselves. So if we want to get the local politically interested people watching this podcast or listening to this podcast or watching this video every month, we'll allow them to identify themselves somehow so we can actually measure our goals.
And just a little bit on that too, the funding issue that you mentioned earlier. Analytics and using that data that's actually either coming through a website first and then, hey, all these people are on mobile. They're using an iPhone or they're using whatever. If we had an app, it would perform so much better. I mean, those are predictable behaviors that we could, look at from a very data-driven kind of perspective. But it speaks to grant writing too. You could say, you can use some of those analytics and data to be part of grants. And I've seen some people be very successful with showing where they're at and then a projection of where they could be by just using a different technology. And we can speak, if anybody's interested in some of that stuff, I love that kind of data, but doing that analytics review is so very important because it gives not only the business an overview of where they're at, but it can actually just provide really, really good information later to get funding. Mm-hmm.
Conceptualize is the design phase, so that's what we have here is 2. Note that we haven't written a line of code yet, but that is where we envision how it's going to work. It's going to be like, okay, what we want is right away, we want to start pushing people on our football games, make sure they know it's there every week. So we need that on the first page. We're doing a new podcast series for whatever it is. Envisioning what the requirements are. Yeah, people should be able to watch it offline. Yeah, we totally want people to be able to watch the game because if they go to it, and they can back to our app and they can watch the game again. Definitely want them to be able to scrub it so they can review plays, etc. We envision the requirements. All software websites typically start in wireframes where the designers are making pictures of what it's going to look like. And then add the design, like the individual branding hooks and logos, and come up with color schemes and stuff like that after they've kind of visualized things and laid it out on a page. Putting everybody's task flow down and kind of, doing like a Visio diagram of where everybody's going to go. So you have people that are just podcast folks, you just want them to get there. You have people that are only going to open your app if they receive a push notification. So you want to have, okay, what's going to present to them when they do it so we can maybe turn them into more active users. But conceptualize is the design phase. Then when it's designed, that's when we build it and do all kind of the coding, right? That's where the coding happens. We want to test everything out, have automated testing and everything like that, and then deploy it. So it's really a 4-step process to make a system. Like for what you guys do, it would be a system. There would be a server. There'd be a web application that you guys would interface with, that you're administering your system, uploading content, putting in new blog posts, uploading new podcasts, saying what should blast out on an RSS feed. You do that in a web application, and then your consumers of your content would consume it on the website, mobile apps, and maybe in a web application.
And just following up on that, what does that all mean? It means there's a lot that goes into building an app. Probably a lot more than people think. And do we have people that we employ, like our designers and everybody, to help through that process? Absolutely. Most anyone that is a business like ours employs people that can be of assistance, should be of assistance. One of our big things is free consultative guidance. We think that your business the best. You should also know your community the best. And just getting that feedback before and as we build this together also can reduce some costs too. I mean, it's very different if somebody comes in and wants an app and knows none of this and we have to walk them through it. But you should have a lot of user feedback. I mean, there's different platforms and things, but ultimately there's just a lot that goes into it. And the more planning that you can do beforehand will help you in the long run, not only with time, but in budget.
Cool. Now I'm going to go through some slides quickly because we talked about them already. I want to stop on this one and just say you don't have to hit it perfectly on the first version. Like there's a spiral here, right, where you kind of go through this process over and over. And she used the term minimum viable product before. There's some folks that are app users, like some people raised their hand earlier. People don't just sort of like to have a high design, or they don't like to just have apps that work. They'll delete that sucker if it doesn't work the way that they expected right away. So while you're going to have various spirals and go around, what we're always advising people to do is say, hey, you've got great ideas. Those belong on paper, and really do what's critical in the first version. When you get a first version out there, you take that paper where you wrote down all of your vision and ideas that you alone had in a room, and you toss it out because now your users are telling you what they want your app to do. And that's kind of the key thing with website, app, web application development, is the market that you are serving should really drive what your requirements are. We could all sit in here, we could lock those doors, have food sent up here, sit in here for a year, and design the best app that we think that there could be for any community media center, and it would work for everybody. We could spend a year documenting it perfectly. We could then leave this room for a year, build it and put it out in the App Store, and the very first day it was in the App Store, the first piece of feedback that we'd get, we'd be like, why didn't we think of that, right? So the whole MVP process is about putting something out there quickly and getting that feedback from your market. Always, you can't see these words, but it should be beautifully and flawlessly executed. Otherwise, people will just delete it off their phone right away. So we always like to remind everybody about iteration planning in that way. So if you're thinking about it, and I'll talk about this in a second, I don't think any of you should individually think about this. First of all, go out and have your own app developed. But like I said, we'll get back to that in a second. But this first one is document your business goals in detail, and then have success metrics for what you would get out of having an app or a technology system. That's the first thing that you can do. Like, you don't have to go learn computer programming or anything, but you want to define what you would expect to get out of providing an app. Then document the market that is going to use it, and make sure you understand your market as well as you can. And then thirdly, document the use cases. So we like to list these out, but think about Carrie, the content consumer, who's going to be the consumer of your content. Go ahead and give her a name, give her a personality. We had document personas on a previous slide. Actually think about, what does Carrie want from her app, and put it down on paper. Is he the influencer? We want to make sure we're thinking of our influencers. Is it going to be the mayor? Like, put the stories in their mouths of what you're going to want them to say. Allie, the administrator. You always have to think about who I always call confused Cornelius, who's a weak user of technology products. You have to support things that you put out there. You have to know that you might, especially as a community media center, be getting phone calls from people saying, hey, I don't know how to do this. How do I do this? And it's like, well, have you ever listened to a podcast before? No, this is going to be the first one. Great. Like, you have to think about how you're going to support it. But also think about who I call Show Off Shoshana, who's a social media braggart. You want to make it really easy for her to be a brand advocate of your community media center, your website, and your app, and have her say, hey, I had no idea that this bevy of information was available for me here in wherever. Merrill's the example that I'll keep using. But look, I can get the school schedules, the city board schedule, whatever it is. You want people to be able to brag about it on their circles as well. We have a 100% success rate. It said it on the slide. Software projects fail all the time. Actually, the majority of them do. We have a 100% success rate. It says here how we define that. But most of the reason is that we advise people to do what I just asked everybody to do on the previous slide. We don't do things until people know what they're doing, right? They have to know what the business is going to get out of it, and we have to know how we're going to measure if it's successful or not. Otherwise, we're never successful, right? Like, you could say, hey, you made the app, it looks great, but we have 3 users. And you're like, well, you didn't tell us users was a goal.
And there's a lot of people, too, that want to have an app just because they think they should have an app. And that's not always the case. Or there's people that want to have an app because they think it's cool to say they have an app. And when you really step back, sometimes, again, that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah.
So, and then there's times where it's like, no, they should have an app. And how do you get from that point to that point is a lot of what we're talking about here.
So the reason that I don't think that any of you individually should consider this, I think everybody individually should consider it and then talk to each other. So here's a sampling of our customers. This is one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world, right? They provide Botox cosmetic, right? They have blockbuster drugs. They have a ton of money. And doing a real system like this with a media server, a file sharing system server, having multiple components, it costs a lot of money. Like Tracy and I, our team, everybody makes over 6 figures that's on our team. Like the developers and the designers, they make a lot of money. It's expensive to develop this stuff. And their wages are going up. So it's expensive to do these types of things. So, the folks that we make apps for are really well-funded startups. There's a couple in here, like Propeller Health just sold last year for $250-some million. Or they're big companies that you've heard of before. And for the community media centers, the way that we see things work is we work with a lot of .orgs as well. So one of our .orgs is called Secure Futures. They're a customer of ours, and I can talk about them. So they went through a process, and they were like, okay, so the budget's big. We're going to have to raise some money and budget it in. So they did that. We gave them, we helped them sort of conceive what they were going to want to do, document their business goals, user goals, et cetera. We conceived the system for them, gave them an estimate for what it would cost. They went and talked to their board and allocated the funding for it. And they do pretty well compared to other .orgs in terms of funding and getting access to funds. What they do is they go into high schools and they teach financial literacy to students in high schools. And they focus on less advantaged areas. So they're in Wisconsin only right now. Thanks to us, they're spreading around a little bit, but like they're focused on Milwaukee is a big thing, and some schools in Green Bay. They're all over the state, but they're really focused on less advantaged kids, teaching them about money and financial literacy.
And they've done a lot of groundwork, though. They've done a lot of boots on the ground stuff that we talked about. Speaking, reaching out to high school teachers. They've done looking at not only grant writing, but partnering with companies who offer particular contests and things. I mean, they've done a lot of out-of-the-box thinking with their team to get the funding for this. So from a strategic standpoint, they've done a lot of really good things.
So they got it funded, and then they called me and they said, hey, if we can put a sponsor on this thing, we think we have a sponsor that's going to pay for the entire thing. And we said, great, send over their logo, let us know who it is. So they did, and for the entire, they have one sponsor that has their name on every page of their system. And they sponsored the entire thing. So they doubled their budget. And they're like, cool, all those ideas on a piece of paper that we're going to throw away, we're going to start looking at some of those now because we have twice the budget we thought we were working for. Then we made the system, and then they won an award in Minneapolis from Thrive Financial. And they like had people that partnered with them after that and started giving them revenue streams that they hadn't even thought about before. So now the system, and it's like tied into how financial literacy is a requirement in 17 of the 50 states right now as part of a high school curriculum. And in the next 4 years, it's going to be in all 50. And now somebody in Minnesota is going to be implementing their system, and they're getting license fees for providing it to people. And then other people started hearing about the system. One of them is a company that just sold for $500 million called PyTech. And they're like, we really want this early stage financial literacy, and part of the technology products that we provided the financial industry, which is what PyTech does. And they just purchased the entire system for way more than their entire budget was. So they've actually made money on this. I don't want to overstep, but for community media centers, do I think like the Wisconsin Rapids local community media center is going to be able to afford a full system? I don't. I probably know that they're not going to be able to. But there may be a coalition of community media centers. I don't know if you know any coalitions of them, Lisa, or organizations. But there's a way to get it funded. There's a way to write grants. There's a way to get budgets. There's a way to get sponsors. And like I said, we work with a lot of .orgs. From going through our process, which I think you've seen a lot of, is just understanding and getting involved with business goals and business strategy. We are pretty helpful to make suggestions with and to sort of partner with folks on it. But in the case of Secure Futures, they now have like a whole profitable part of their .org that's generating income for them so that they can increase their terrestrial services, as it's called. Like they're providing better services in the schools. Is that all we have?
When there's a way, when there's a will, there's a way, right? Questions? That was a lot of information.
Do you have any Alexa developers?
Yeah, Alexa works with something called skills. It has a general term. So if you're going to program something to like custom to your Alexa, they have Android and iOS apps which work in unison with your Alexa. And that whole kind of system is called skills.
Okay.
But absolutely, like the whole mobile thing has gone in that way with voice recognition. So yeah, we make Alexa apps.
There's a radio station in Milwaukee, WTMJ, which I listened to fairly recently, within last year. So, listen to us on Alexa, Alexa, listen to WTMJ, and I was thinking Sun Prairie. They're a radio station too.
Absolutely, and that's
We
like,
use TuneIn. You can say, Alexa, use TuneIn to
To go do it, yeah,
go to
that's
that
awesome,
station.
yeah.
and Google Home's the same way, right? Like Apple Home, which less people use. But that's I'm really, really glad you brought that up, right? Because that's a lot of where, like Tracy says, we provide free consultative guidance, which we do to everybody to try to help them figure out what they do. We know where the freebies are, right? So like doing live streaming of football games is going to be expensive no matter what. Saying, Alexa, I want to listen to Rosa Radio, whatever your community media center is. That's one of those what I would call freebies, where it's like, it's easy to do. It's not costly to do. It adds a lot of value. And that's something that would be like a no-brainer inclusion. Absolutely. Great question.
Do you have other ideas for monetizing an app, or is sponsorship the?
So
obvious
yeah,
answer?
totally right. Like I've been sitting back and like I worked with a lot of different media companies, and that's one of the folks that I work with. You guys may have heard of Love Wisconsin. Has anybody heard of Love Wisconsin? Yeah. All right. But when they started it, they were like, we want to become this platform to take care of that local connection. Right? With Wisconsin in particular, there's something sort of special about being in Wisconsin that's special to us. The culture is disappearing as more people only watch like either Fox or CNN for their news source. Like the local connection is gone, right? So they built a brand, they actually sold the company. But we were talking about it. And I've always thought that like the system that we're talking about, I always thought like Clear Channel or iHeartRadio would make a product that any media center could use, right? But they haven't. Like there's nobody that's addressing two needs. I see them as two needs. One is you all need to evolve to have your content available on every place that people consume your content. And, where's the pizza place in Sunbury that I go to all the time? It just moved fairly recently and went downtown. I forgot the name.
Salvatore's?
Salvatore's, right? They can't afford to buy ads anywhere. They don't know, like, they wouldn't know how to use like Google ads locally and target people locally. They aren't going to buy a commercial that's going to be on cable news or that's going to be on anywhere. They can't afford that. They have a real advertising need to create awareness within a targeted community base. You have a real need to provide your content on all form factors to a targeted media base. Those things should coalesce to become a monetization opportunity and give Salvatore's the ability to subscribe for something affordable, $50 a month or whatever it is. Our ads are going to appear. We're going to have voice ads. We're going to do some stuff that we can do locally. And it actually helps you fill out your content as well, right? There's a real need. Like I'm almost 50. I'm not going to reveal your age, but
40.
there's some younger folks that are here as well. People are really hungry to get more engaged with their community again. Like the reason that I live in the neighborhood that I live in, which is in the Near East Side of Madison, is it's a neighborhood. Like I go out to shovel snow after it snows. My neighbor's out there, my walks are clear, and he's got a coffee for me, and we sit and we talk for half an hour. Like, people really want to connect with their communities again. Like this sort of dissatisfaction with everybody being disrupted by these is known and it's palpable. And people want to use these to get back to a human connection that matters. Go.
Booster clubs. Are you involved with booster clubs at all from a sports perspective at the high school level?
Marginally.
Okay. So the reason why I bring booster clubs up from like a monetization, obviously there's different types of booster clubs. I mean, there's really, really great ones at fundraising, and then there's ones that are just starting out or whatever. But from personal experience, there are some booster clubs with the right strategy coming in, being like the official provider of the games or whatever it is, who are willing to pay for that, willing to give the access to their parents, their families that are from out of town, and using kind of that strategy to pull their heartstrings to view things. So some of, there's some different models, and I'd love to talk to you about it later, but, yeah, booster clubs is a really interesting thing that we could talk about.
I don't even know if it's legal for you guys to have advertising on any of your platforms.
No.
Do you guys know? Oh, yeah, totally is.
Yeah.
So, yeah, all I'll say is like, Google knew from the beginning that they were an advertising company. Facebook didn't. And it's when they learned that they were an advertising company that they started to actually make money and monetize, and their stock price is finally going up. Snapchat absolutely did not know that they were an advertising company, and it's not until recently that they had that realization that they started actually making some money. But when you provide via is the short answer here, and really access to content via internet connected devices, it is media, you're an advertising company, right? You're gonna make your money on advertising. The sooner you realize that, in my opinion, the less pain that you have to go through, like Facebook and Snapchat went through, and Twitter still goes through it to some extent. The sooner you know that, the more it's integrated, and you use it as a differentiating factor instead of like, we're too cool to advertise. Oh wait, we're gonna advertise. Oh, we have no infrastructure for it. Like, knowing that going into it, in my opinion, is it's a wise decision. I don't see any more. Go ahead.
You would not recommend charging for the app. You would recommend making the app available for free.
I think so. Like, I think so. Like,
Yes.
It's really good.
I wouldn't pay, I don't pay for any.
I would totally say no, free. You may have a different, but I say, no, you have to make it free.
Oh, you want my dollar.
And you don't have to have where
No, I agree.
it requires you to,
I pay so much.
I hate it when an app,
phone.
like, wants to take over your smartphone.
Yeah.
It's like, you do this and install this, it's gonna take over your camera, blah, 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 blah. And it's like- So, because, what's the percentage? I know it's over 50% of all the apps on the App Store and Play Store, whatever, are not secure. You download it and, all depending.
Especially with privacy nowadays, where people are hypersensitive to it, and they should be for good reason.
So,
Yeah.
I ran into it where, you're getting all these pop-ups, and then, first thing I do is get the app off my phone. Because they're trying to make money doing those in-app ads.
You don't want to give them a reason to delete it before they've even found the benefit of it. It's really what it comes down to.
Yeah, but the short answer to your question is, if there's really specialized information and people are using it professionally, apps like that do pretty well. Education and healthcare are the two places where people are monetizing, and then games. But it's not even apps. You never paid for any consumer software before there were even smartphones, besides for Microsoft Windows or for games. And it's just the same thing now. You only pay for games.
Yeah.
And Microsoft Windows isn't available for you. But if any of you can tell me a piece of consumer software that you purchased when it was just PCs, you'll be surprising me. So consumers don't pay for software, ever.
Well, thank you very much. It's,
Yeah, thank you.
got 5 minutes before the
No, before the lunch, I think, is next.
No, thank you very much.